take a moment to acknowledge that the land we work, reside, and play belongs to the indigenous people of this land who have resided upon it for millenniums. We also want to acknowledge that we too are treaty people, and we want to always keep this in mind as we live on this land. I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Tokwe for an introduction of why we're here today. Welcome again, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. T, for the land acknowledgement. Thank you, everyone, for spending today with us. Thank you for being a part of this very crucial conversations. It's not comfortable, as you can tell by how it's been going, but we've all agreed that this is important. We need to talk about these things. We need to address the things that give us stress, the things that give our children stress, and continue to explore ways to support ourselves, to support our community, and to get help. And that's why we do what we do at Aspire Hub. Aspire Hub is a youth-serving organization. We are very youth-focused, but by extension, we are also family-focused because we believe that our youth thrive when they are in a very good enabling environment, in a very great family environment. So we work closely in partnership with parents and other support organizations to make sure that our students get the help they need. We have a number of programming that we do in technology. Training is a big part of our program, is what we popularly call STEM. So we do STEM training. We train the students in robotics, in coding, web development, video editing, AI, machine learning, all of the new cool technology around that are here to stay. Then we also teach life skills. We teach leadership. We teach, decision making. Problem solving, money management, because we are very confident that the students are going to make a lot of money. They are going to do so well. But when they make their first million, we don't want them to squander it. We don't want them to spend it on gambling or just, wasting it away. We want them to learn from a young age how to invest this money. So we teach money management. We teach some other life skills. We teach health, because health is wealth. And these conversations are actually part of our health and wellness series. That is what got us into these anti-racism conversations. It's when we started to evaluate the stress level of our students, we saw that some of them are being deeply racialized, or some of them they don't even know that they are racialized, or they are experiencing discrimination. We've had some of them that were bold to ask questions, like, this happened in my school, and I reported it to my teacher, and my teacher did not take any action. This happened. I talked to the vice principal, and they just waved it like it's just normal. It's just like regular bullying. Just deal with it. Just ignore it. But should we ignore it? Is it normal? Should we expect these behaviors to be normal? What is going on in government? What is going on in leadership? How do we get support? So that's what we've come. We had three series up until now. We talked about the different faces of racism. What does it look like? We've talked about leadership and anti-racism. We've talked about what it looks like among our youth. And so last month, we had the honor of having Ms. Shayla and Ms. Noreen, who are also here today with us, they took us through a very deep concept about our identity, because it's actually when we know who we are that we can fight, because this fight is first from within, then without. So it was great that they gave us that foundation about how our children can be rooted and grounded in who they are, knowing who they are, and how to continue to show up for themselves. But today we are taking the conversation a little further to talk about allyship, which is a very interesting concept on its own. But because the work that Michelle and Ms. Noreen, what they do is very deeply rooted in community. So they are going to bring a different perspective to these conversations today to talk about allyship and how we can spot who is an ally, how we can be allies ourselves, how we can continue to build this community and continue to access resources to help us to thrive. Because in the end, what we want to do is to thrive. We want to thrive. We want our children to thrive. We want our community to thrive. So I'm not going to give it away because I'm not an expert. They are. They know what they're doing. I'm a learner, and I will forever be a long-term learner in this space. And I'm blessed to have great teachers surrounding me to teach me. So I want us to also open ourselves up to learn, to share, to be vulnerable. This is a safe space, to ask questions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce this awesome woman. Oh, I'm not even going to introduce them. I'm just going to pass the baton to them. They've introduced themselves before, so they probably just tell us a little bit more about themselves. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me, Miss Sheila and Miss Noreen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tope. We're going to share our screen so that we can follow through together. So today we're going to talk about what is being an ally, and we will go through that. So a little bit about myself. I'm Noreen, and if I am not out in the community doing presentations, I'm a therapist, and other ways that I describe myself, I am also a lifelong learner like you, Tope, and I enjoy traveling and cooking.
And I am Shayla, and I'm a mom. I think for people who were here last time, was it last month? I mentioned that I'm a mother first. So it's the title that I wear with pride. And when I'm not mothering and adulting, I'm a social worker and a therapist as well. And I think Noreen and I today are joining you guys as part of the community. And we hope that we will be talking with you and not talking at you. So we'll try to make this as conversational as possible and experiential as well. So thank you for being here.
So as Tope said, we're here to learn, and we recognize that the topic that we're talking about is not always easy to talk about. So we want to make sure that everyone feels safe to do so. And I can see people are on camera, some are not. That's perfectly fine. Do whatever you need to feel safe and engage as much as you can. But we ask that as you show up here, be mindful that people are going through different things. And when you are sharing, sometimes it's not what has been said, but how somebody else receives it. And we ask for confidentiality. Feel free to share the learnings, but please don't share the name of the person that said what they said. You are welcome to add to what somebody else has said without taking away from their experience. And that is to say, please be open to having different opinions, that for yourself and for others, and be gentle with yourselves as well as you go through this. We're not here to label anyone as having done anything wrong, but we're also here to learn and identify different ways and have different ways of conceptualizing things, because we only know what we know and we don't know what we don't know yet. Anything else?
That's it. In terms of safety, since we are talking about a topic that we've all acknowledged that it's a difficult topic to talk about. So if you find yourself triggered, we ask that you pause and sit with that. And if you could nurture yourself in that discomfort. I think Noreen already said, do what you need to do to make yourself feel comfortable. And usually triggers are just messengers. They're just telling you what needs to be addressed or what needs to be healed.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you have aha moments, that's also great, right? We're not here to only highlight the negative. We also want to highlight the strengths and the beautiful learnings that could come from our conversation.
And if those aha moments come, please feel free to use the chat. You can use the plus, or you can be as creative as you need to be to make this as fun as we can.
So we've talked about how this is an ongoing conversation that started with understanding the different faces of racism. And I think part of that conversation is hearing people's experiences, knowing that racism is not experienced in one form, nor is it going to be only one face of it. So it doesn't look one way. But also, it is something that is embedded in a lot of the systems that we deal with, right? And hence why we had the conversation about leadership and anti-racism. So what is taking place at higher levels? What is happening at government? What's happening at schools? How are they addressing? How are they understanding it? So that we know that we're not working in isolation, right? I like your description, Topia, when you said we can't just work with youth. We work with the environment that they live in as well, because we cannot simply say, hey, you're empowered, now go back into the world, and the world is not ready to receive them. The world also needs to change. Hence why we need leadership to be part of the conversation. And in understanding BIPOC youth in the Canadian context, we also get to understand our own experiences. And when we did the Tree of Life activity, it was about adults also reflecting on their own experiences and how those can play an impact on how individuals, in particular youth, present and understand. And this becomes really important in our topic for today of allyship, because if you know yourself, then you're able to trust yourself in finding those safe people and safe spaces. You also feel empowered enough to stand up, to engage with people, even if it means them not necessarily understanding at the beginning.
And for our agenda today, we are hoping that by the time that we are done this workshop, we would have covered the 7 items that you see on your screen. One being, what is allyship, intersection of power and privilege and allyship? What are the pillars of allyship? The different kinds of allyship, the steps that you can take in becoming an ally, the benefits of being an ally and having allies, and how to be an ally, which will be putting everything together into practice.
Mm-hmm. So, Shayla, we keep talking about this big word of allyship. What's a different way of understanding it if we don't use that?
Right. Recently, I said that being an ally or allyship, I think, is another way of saying Ubuntu. Because when we think about Ubuntu, is about being human with each other. When we look at the actual definition of what allyship is, it's really about the dominant people in the dominant groups fighting against the form of oppression that gives them privilege. And a good example of that would be a man fighting against sexism, or a white person fighting against racism. And for our youth in particular, to make this relevant, if you see a child, one of your friends being bullied, you stand up with them or stand up against the bully. So those are some of the examples of what being an ally is.
So what I'm hearing from what you're saying is you don't have to have the lived experience, but you can support someone that may be going through whatever situation, X situation, right?
Right.
And it's about understanding that there's an impact
Right.
that's happening for that particular person.
Right. And talking about impact, we always talk about the difference between intent and impact.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have great intentions, but it's really focusing on how people are impacted. So you may have good intentions when people may have good intentions when they say to you, you speak good English, but you may be impacted as a person who's an immigrant. Maybe you are reminded of how hard it's been to have your accent or whatever the issue might be. So yes, that's very important to think about the impact. And we also have to listen and learn from those who live in oppression. So the listening part is very important. And when we listen to people, it means we have to believe them, because there is nothing as invalidating as sharing your pain with people who don't believe you, or where you feel like you need to justify why you're feeling the way that you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm also understanding that we all have privilege then. There's certain spaces in which we are privileged. For one, we're privileged to be the ones doing the speaking today. In reality, anyone on this call is also in a space to be able to share what they experience, right? And a big part of privilege is acknowledging that it exists.
Right.
We don't necessarily wake up and say, today I have privilege or I don't have privilege. It's already there. One of the ways that I often think about how I'm privileged is I'm able-bodied.
Right.
So I don't have to think about what room I cannot get into based on maybe I have a wheelchair, right. Maybe I'm too short that I can access the door, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a privilege that I inherently have, and the world that I live in is already built for that.
Right.
Good.
And another example would be being right-handed. Most of us are right-handed, and most of the things that we use, the doors and everything, are designed for people
isn't the car left?
Except for the car, but most things are. So that, again, that's a privilege. So when we talk about privilege, we have to think about that it's unearned, that it's just something that you have, which Noreen said earlier, it's not really your fault, but it's important that we think about it and also think about how it impacts those who don't have the privilege. And we see the yielding, the flow that you see on the screens. It's really another way of saying decentering. When you decenter yourself, it means you are focusing on the other person. So the other person who's being oppressed, or the other person who's being victimized. And as an ally, your job is to listen and not make it about yourself. Not say, oh, maybe you're over exaggerating. Maybe you didn't hear that well. So it's really about listening without being quick to question or respond or discredit, just really listening to people to understand from their perspective.
And so being an ally doesn't have an age, right? Anyone can be an ally.
Right.
Being an ally is something that we can all do in different ways, in different aspects of our world. Right? Because I can walk into a store and I can open the door opens, doesn't mean it happens all the time. I recently had an experience in the bathroom where with the automatic dispensers, for whatever reason, it never senses me. Right? And I'm like, what is this? But that's part of the experiences that we're talking about, that something like that was designed by someone whose skin tone is different than mine.
Right.
So when the machine senses, it senses that person's skin tone rather than mine. Or if my hands are still wet, the paper towel will come out. But if they're not, the paper towel is not coming out. So it's so much embedded in so many ways in the things that we deal with, that it doesn't have to be something that is specific to a particular position. We can see it in so many aspects of our daily world. So knowing that we have privilege helps us recognize different things. So we have 2 activities that are going to be going at the same time. So Be gentle with us for 2 seconds here while we stop sharing our screen. I am going to put this in the chat so that people can see it. 1. And then we'll play a video that will get us having this conversation in a different way as well. So in the chat, you now have a link to a PDF. If you're on a computer, it will be a lot easier to see. If you are on a phone, maybe not as much, but it is also still part of the larger conversation of the video that we're going to be sharing. This is an opportunity for you to reflect on your own privileges, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second. But let's play the video so that it helps ground us.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race. Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder. Take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up. We're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. A $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go. If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
Please feel free to use the chat to share your your impressions of the video. What's coming up for you after watching this video?
So we're not all outside. No, can we do a race? But this is a different way of doing that same activity. You have the flower in front of you, and you're only allowed to choose one petal at a time. So, for example, if you are an immigrant, it's not immigrant and citizen, you choose one. If you are Christian, you choose Christian or non-Christian. If you're upper class, poverty, you choose one. English or non-English, cis or trans, right? If there isn't an area that represents where you are, feel free to use the extra petals to add that in.
And if you have any questions, please use your chats. We'll try to read the chat and respond. So this is an activity really that's it's a different version of what we just watched, where we are asked to dive deeper in and reflect on how we have those two sides that we talked about, being privileged and being oppressed at the same time. Or as you look at the petals, you may find that some of the petals intersect. You could be a woman who's racialized and who is non-Christian. So all of us here are being challenged to reflect on who we are and our relationship to the different kinds of oppression.
One that we had talked about was skin tone, which doesn't get talked about, but it makes a difference, right? Different people are treated differently depending on the skin tone, but also, well, we had class, right? I saw class in them.
Right. When you talk about skin tone, I couldn't help but think of when people are wearing shoes, or we have the color nude. And I always say, how is it nude?
Nude for who?
Nude for who? Yes, absolutely. But that's the default.
Yeah.
And those are the things we are being asked to reflect on in this activity.
And it's an ongoing activity, so you don't have to reflect and finish it today.
Right.
This is something that you can continue to work on, or maybe later on this evening, after dinner, you're just sitting there and reflecting. You can think about some of this. I love how I was like, is the S was first before the I?
Right.
And some feelings are initial. So as you go through this activity, or even watching that video, was that comfortable or was it uncomfortable? Right? Are there petals that you're particularly insecure about that maybe you're comfortable talking about with certain people, but not all people? How does it feel to be in the inner or the outer group? Because in some situations, you can be part of the inner group, and in some, you could be in the outer group.
Right.
So power presents differently, but so does oppression. So these are things to continue to consider, and feel free to come back and reference it as we go through the rest of the presentation.
So we hope this activity was helpful to some degree. As Noreen said, that this is becoming an ally, being an ally, and allyship is a process. It's a journey. It's not really a destination. So as we continue the conversation, we're going to look at the pillars of authentic allyship. There's a hand. Please go ahead, Sister Tope.
Sister. Okay, I love that. Like, I'm your sister, not the other one. Right. So there is like a private chat, like if we want to give people chance to unmute themselves and actually contribute, that's allowed. I think someone wanted to say something and be unmuted, and unmute themselves and contribute.
Yes.
So we can give room for that, I guess, just to kind of reflect on the video.
Right.
As you
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. This is our chance. Do we still have people that want to unmute themselves and give some feedback?
And sometimes it takes time to digest.
I think there's a hand. Is that Miss T? There's somebody raised their hand.
Yeah, she will be there in a second. And there's a few versions of this video, right? We've seen it done with adults. We've seen it done with youth. We wanted to show the youth one, really to put that into context for the youth. But go ahead.
We are going to move on to the pillars.
Someone shared that did it with my husband just yesterday.
Oh.
It did make one move and it made me realize I was privileged. Yeah.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Pillars of authentic allyship.
But I also wanted to say something that, and this is what I was going to say, that many times when we look at privilege, it's not only when you are Caucasian and you're wealthy and you have home insurance or you have life insurance. Privilege could also be determined by immigration status, can also be determined. My point is, even amongst we Black people, there are some amongst us that are also privileged, and we should be conscious that we're all not operating at the same starting point as everybody, and nothing is ever as it seems. And we should be conscious of that because we all come from a variety of different backgrounds, and many amongst us have suffered different life, changing delays here and there, this and that. That's just what I wanted to point out. Even though the video we saw was like, it just showed that a lot of Black people, Black homes don't have two parents, income disparity, gender disparity, health disparities, and so on and so forth. But even amongst ourselves as there are people at the top of that ladder, so-called, and people just scrambling and struggling. I just wanted us to maybe even reflect on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. And I think the flower was an extension of that, as it really expands to the other areas of diversity and other areas of identity. So thank you for adding to that. And one example is some of us come from countries that are English speaking, Zimbabwe being one of them. I'm giving Zimbabwe as an example, as Noreen and I are from Zimbabwe, but some people from other countries come, some of their countries are French speaking or other languages. So when you come here, that also can be a privilege or put you on the oppressed side and things like that. So thank you for adding to that, T. And as we move to the pillars of authentic allyship, I want to emphasize the authenticity piece when we talk about authentic, because sometimes the way that we show up for others can be performative. And what we mean by performative is if you only do it for the cameras, or you only do it when people are watching, but beyond that, or behind closed doors, you don't really continue with that allyship journey. So these are some of the pillars of authentic allyship. The list is not exhaustive. You guys can add on to that list. You can use the chat if you think of something that we didn't touch on, but social action is one of them. Because we can all talk the talk here, we can talk about allyship, but it's what we do. It's the action part that makes it allyship. We gave the examples that we've given. So far, you saw, we're going to show another video that will help us put things into practice. But in a nutshell, it's the doing part that differentiate the performance and the authentic allyship. And we've already talked about listening to understand. because you can listen to someone when they are talking to you, but you can be listening here and it could be coming out of the other ear, or you could just be internally rolling your eyes or thinking, she's just making things up. She's just exaggerating. So really listening to understand is listening with empathy, hearing what's not being said, seeing the emotions of that person that's sharing the experience. And the learning piece, as people are sharing their stories and experiences, we are learning from those stories. What are you learning when someone shares with you that they were being followed in the store? Or perhaps that we are all from the same affinity group, we are all Black, but it could be that maybe due to colorism, your experience of Blackness is different from the other person. So it's really learning from each other and not painting each other with the same brush that, I'm Black too. Yes, you could be Black too, but your experience of life could be different from the other person. And the yielding piece, I believe we've already talked about that. It's the decentering piece. It's really giving that person the 100% attention to share their story and learn from it.
And being flexible.
Absolutely. And the flexibility really is about willing to learn, willing to shift what you know, because we don't know everything, as we already said. So if you hear a story, having that willingness to shift your thoughts and what you thought maybe about that group, because I think it's common knowledge that all of us have our own biases. And the humility point is really a straightforward. And Noreen, when we talk about humility, what comes to mind?
Being grounded and knowing that you are also human. So you are going to make mistakes, and other people can make mistakes as well, whether about you or about themselves. So it's coming from that space of understanding that they do not always mean harm.
Right.
And it's not about being harmful towards me, but because we're human and we're in relationship, sometimes that means we're going to hurt each other. But it's the willingness to come back and repair that sets us apart. And I think you said it at the beginning with Ubuntu. That means I recognize that I make mistakes, and so do you.
Right. And with that humility piece, I think it's important to remember that being an ally, the journey of allyship is really an imperfect and fluid journey. It needs that flexibility. There is no perfect way of doing it. So with humility, we recognize that we're going to make mistakes, and making mistakes is part of the journey. And empathy and curiosity. Curiosity is really it really boils down to when you learn somebody's story, you're willing to shift and ask those questions about tell me more, versus questioning
or minimizing the experience.
Right.
Taking away that there's no way that's the experience that you're having, because that means your experience is invalid.
Right.
And we'll watch a video about the difference between empathy and sympathy, right?
Right.
But with the empathy piece is I don't have to experience it, right? As we sit here, I've just been thinking about, and I don't know why the physical body is where my mind is at today, about how when you're at the mall and somebody opens the door for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do it yourself. Right. But it's about knowing that there's a time where I might be carrying more bags, and I know how difficult it is to try open the door at the same time. So then I open the door for somebody else. Right. And it doesn't mean that I'm not capable, but at the same time, it's knowing and being able to go to that space where I can see that being a challenge and I acknowledge that.
Right. And I think with curiosity too, it's really sometimes asking people what they need. Sometimes people just need listening and not any advice whatsoever. And sometimes or solutions, because we are quick to fix, especially as mothers. We are quick to find solutions. Sometimes your child just needs you to sit with them and experience whatever emotions they are bringing with you, and just holding space without trying to fix. Yeah. And lastly, creating space for others to take up space is really about the recognizing our privileges, as we have seen in the video, as we have been practicing in the chart that we have.
Go ahead, Tope, before we move.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question that came in. When you were talking about diminishing experiences that people have had, so someone asked that if their experiences have been diminished, what should be their reaction? If they feel like they feel this experience is negative. This is someone was not being nice to them, and they feel like it's because of the color of their skin, or because of their accent, or because of whatever that is race based. And they try to talk about it. And with some of our students have talked about this before, but it was good that this question is coming again. What should be their reaction in that moment when their experience has been diminished?
Whatever their reaction is, that reaction is valid, because there isn't one reaction that's going to be the right one, is the first thing. I think what I'm hearing from that question is, what do I do internally for me to recognize that that one individual that is minimizing my experience is one individual, not everyone, right? But also at the same time, my experience stays valid regardless of the next person's understanding of it.
And I think sometimes it's important to remember that people's inability to validate our experience may have nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with them and where they are at with their emotional intelligence. Not everyone is able to sit with you with those emotions. And sometimes that inability to understand you or share the pain with you could just mean that and nothing else. And it doesn't really reduce your experience in any way.
And it is a difficult space to go into to have that understanding, because probably you reached out looking for that empathy from someone, and for somebody to minimize that experience makes it even twice as difficult for you to feel heard, right? As Shayla said, people are in different spaces, right? We cannot account for who, but as we go along, we're going to talk about what's the difference between people that are performing versus people that are actually there for you, and how can you tell the difference? I like your example about parents, because as parents, we're eager to shield our kids from experiences, right? But sometimes that takes away from us being an ally for them, because we're not necessarily teaching them how to respond, because they don't get to see us struggle with that. At times, it's okay to say, I don't have the right answer, nor do I know what to do with this situation, but let's figure it out together.
And maybe to answer the question directly, perhaps the question we should be asking is, how do you sit with your emotions in that moment, whatever that emotion is? As Noreen said, that there's no one way. So if you have anger, and obviously you feel like punching that person, we know that's going to be, that's not okay. So how do you sit with that in that moment? So it's really learning to nurture ourselves through discomfort, because I can guarantee that no one's going to be happy with feeling invalidated or feeling that my story is being minimized. So it's really a question of, how do I handle my emotions, and being able to name that you're feeling angry. And so that's a lot of internal work versus trying to reason with someone who's not meeting you where you are. I hope that we've managed to answer the question.
Yeah, I would like to just contribute a little bit as well from my own lens, from my own lived experience. Okay. When Adeze was talking about doing that activity with her husband, and the husband not answering any of the questions, I think I can relate. I could relate with that a little bit. But I didn't know that it was a privilege thing until now that we're learning this with you, my own experience. So I didn't grow up with my dad. He wasn't dead at that time. It was just that he was not with my mother. So, when I got married into a beautiful family with both parents present. All of my own lived experience, I never saw my dad and mom sit together to talk about us, not to say even having fun as a family. So when I got married and I saw my husband's parent and the way they interacted and the way they loved each other and the way they loved the family, and they would make some jokes and I'll be like, oh my gosh, is this a joke? Like, and I would feel like it was too strong. But it was a joke, and everybody would have a good time laughing about it. Mm-hmm. It was something that I really admired. So there was a day where I think I was in a movie with my husband, and this kid had deep-rooted daddy issues. So he made a joke about, oh, this guy had daddy issues. He just made a joke about the experience the kid that was in that movie had. And I asked him that, do you know what it feels to not grow up with a father? Mm. And I guess it was at that moment that he realized that maybe I'm that kid in the movie. He did not even understand that he had the privilege. Mm. Right. And that is something that I missed. It's something that I never had. So, but he paused the movie and we had a conversation. Like, we've never talked about my experience that way since we've been married. So it gave him a different perspective as to appreciating that privilege that he had, and then trying to understand my own experience of not having that lived experience. I guess I'm not even sure I'm tying it up, but I'm just reading Adeze's comment again, and I'm like, privilege. This privilege thing is a conversation that we probably need to kind of, unpack a little bit we're talking about racism. We're talking about the disparities that we feel with our white people, but even among us Black, like T said, there are privileges that we need to be mindful of. And when we see the difference, that empathy, that humility for us to stand up and be allies to the people with that power difference, I think it's something that we need to continue to explore as we explore this journey. The second point that I want to mention was about when you talked about parents, how we should be present with our children. Last April, we had a meeting where we separated, at Aspire, we separated the parents were in one room and the students were in one room. And one of the feedback that we got from the student was that they don't want to talk to their parents about these things, this racism or bullying or the experiences they're having at school, because one, some parents trivialize it, some parents just minimize it, and some parents, like myself, we overreact. So, so I guess the question that I want to ask following to that is, how do we draw the line between, being present, in listening to our parents, our children, how do we make sure that we are not overreacting and we are not diminishing?
Right. I think it's a conversation. I'll give an example of one of my daughters. I have 3. We have an understanding that I intervene when she needs me to. She communicates when she wants me to intervene. If she's able to handle something, for instance, that overreacting, and I think I was, or maybe I still am. It's work in progress that I overreact. So it's a continued conversation, and where I was a few years ago and where I am now, it's different. But we talk. So when you talk to your children, I think you get to learn how you are being helpful, because sometimes we can make things worse thinking we are we are being helpful. So that continued conversation with your child to say, if mommy gets involved right now, or if mommy talks to your school, will that be helpful for you? But also sometimes we have to be bigger and make the decisions, because if your child's being bullied all the time and they are telling you not to get involved, obviously we have to intervene. So I really think there's no one answer. And sometimes how you respond to child number one will be different to child number two. Some kids are better at advocating themselves than others, and some you need to advocate for them all the time. And Noreen, do you have anything else?
I guess what came up for me is even asking, do you need mom to listen? Do you need a solution? Right? How can I be helpful for you? Because often they already have ideas about what they would like to see.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that idea is complete, but it might be a beginning of an idea. So then you can say, how can we build on that idea together? Have you thought about this? Have you considered this? Would an email be a good starting point? Or would you rather do a phone call, right? When I work with youth in session, I often leave it to them and say, I'm hearing that you're getting to a point where you'd want to address this. Do you want to address directly? Do you want to write a note? What feels the most comfortable for you, right? So you give it back to them to decide how they want to proceed without it necessarily, this is the solution. And when you say talk, I'll go with listen. I'll go with listen, because the same thing we say, my kids don't listen, when we mean our kids don't obey what we ask them to do, is the same thing that can be said for us, because we can hear the words, but do we really hear what they would like to see happen, right? Because we tend to have the authority to make certain decisions and we go over them instead of saying, I'm going with you. We can try this for the first 2 weeks. In a month, we're going to have to come up with a different solution. And you come up with it together, because then it builds that resiliency and it allows them to know that they don't necessarily need you to solve the problem, but they might need you to come and bounce the ideas off with them.
Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So I think earlier we're talking about how to sit with people when they're sharing difficult situations with us and demonstrating empathy versus sympathy. And Brené Brown has an amazing video. If you haven't seen it, this is going to be a great introduction. If you've seen it, I have.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had a, yeah. And we do it all the time. You know, they'll just share with us. It's painful. And we're trying to silver it. I don't think that, but I'm using it as one. we're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Any thoughts come up from that video? Yeah. Truly.
Connection. That's the word that I heard. Yeah. It's not just about the response. It's more about the connection. Connection first before the response. Like connection kind of drives the response eventually. Yeah, I guess that's what resonated with me. I don't know if any other person wants to contribute.
Like I mentioned, I've watched this video a couple of times, and in my real life, I catch myself when I say at least. I do catch myself. I'm like, why am I saying at least, right? But part of it is the limitation of the English language. But I get it where sometimes we want people to feel better, but people feel better by sharing.
At least you are not a refugee. I think we've heard that from our parents. At least you didn't live in a shelter.
Yeah. At least you've got food on your table, right? Don't complain that it's not pizza. So as much as we can, not coming from at least, because that perspective is already saying whatever challenges you have, other people have it worse. We're not here to compare. We're here to hear what you are experiencing. Get along, being mindful of time, and we still have a little bit to go. So, what allyship is not about saving someone or being a hero, right? It is about using our individual powers, which we all have, including our voices, to create environments that feel more authentic and can be more equitable in recognizing that it's not always equal for everyone. Not everyone starts at the same place, right? So we're not performing. We're not doing it because other people are watching or it's on social media, but it's a way of being. It's who we are, right? There is an understanding that we're not going to get it right, and that's okay. What we work on is we keep trying because it's not about being perfect. There is no manual of doing it. We focus on the actions that we can do and the ones that we know. I'm not going to take up things that I'm not able to do. And that's a big part of being an ally because I don't claim to speak for other people. I open up the space to say, hey, anyone else want to share something different that I may not be thinking about? We mean what we say, right? And we follow through with it. Some of these ways of being an ally have been embedded in natural ways of doing things within our cultures, right? A simple thing as when there's an elder in the room, you offer them your chair. It's something that has always been, and it's something that we all know, right? When we say kids eat first is because knowing that they may not be able to reach everything, so let's give them an opportunity to go first because the adults can take up everything, right? And it's little things like that that are already within our ways of doing that we don't have to necessarily use the word. but we're already doing it in different ways.
And I like that they're saying it's not about having a title, because I think sometimes we think being an ally means you have to be occupying a big position or be a principal or be a manager somewhere, but we can be allies amongst each other when we recognize where we are, when we are privileged, since we've been talking about privilege and how it shows up in different aspects. And now we are going to talk about different ways of being an ally. And we extracted these examples from a book called Be Better Allies. And so we're just going to go through these quickly, because I think it's really not about memorizing the words. It's really in the doing. When we say the first one is being a sponsor, I think we can look at the word sponsor in the way that it's meant to be. A sponsor openly supports their fellow humans who are being underrepresented, people who are being marginalized. I'm wondering what's coming for you when you think about what a sponsor does. If you can use the chat or unmute yourself. For instance, if you are, some of us, we volunteer in group homes or in things like that, and you can sponsor that event, or you can have a stand of lemonade and what have you. So there's really different ways of how you can be a sponsor. It's not generally has to do with material, but it's really taking that leadership role to advocate and help someone else who is in a less privileged position than you.
Can a big brother or a big sister be a sponsor?
Absolutely. Right. And being a champion. And we know that champions are the people that takes initiative. So when you know that this is designed for youth. So when you know that a fellow friend is being bullied, it's really taking that championship to make sure you're walking with them, make sure you're offering safety in however way you can. And I also want to acknowledge, though, that I don't want to paint a picture that being an ally is an easy role. Sometimes it's not safe to do all those things. So we encourage people to do these things only when it feels safe. Being an advocate. An advocate really uses their voice and their power, their privilege, to make those that are underprivileged comfortable, or rather to make their lives better, or to reduce the injustices that they are feeling. I can think of an example just today online. I think Dr. Miriam was a presenter in the previous workshops. In one of her posts, somebody commented recommending another coach, and just two people were advocating that how can you come to her space and recommend somebody else without actually acknowledging that she does the work. So it's really not waiting for that person to, it doesn't mean that Dr. Miriam doesn't have a voice. I think she can advocate for herself, but it's really when you witness those things, it's really using our own voices to support each other. I think that's what being an ally means, so that we're not walking alone in those cases of injustices. And that's exactly what being an amplifier is. When we talk about an amplifier, I think of a speaker that boosts things. So again, you are shining your light on the people that have less privilege than you. And I don't know if Noreen, you can think of an example.
Oh, I do like the example of the speaker, because the speaker doesn't sing or produce the music. The music is already there, but it makes sure that everybody is able to hear it, right? It reaches wider access, right? And sometimes it's as simple as reposting somebody else's post on Instagram, right? It doesn't cost any money, or sharing something, or recognizing. I keep thinking about that lunchroom example of like a champion will be the one to say, there is a chair, you're welcome to use it. An amplifier will be the one to say, it is okay for people that don't necessarily look like us to sit on our table too. Right. And then they're spreading that message around to everybody else. They're not just doing it in a small space, but they allow for it to be something that's across.
Right. And the upstander versus bystander, and I think if there's any of these different ways of being an ally, I think it's the most important one, because we mentioned earlier on that the social action piece is really what defines allyship. So when you see an injustice, or when you see someone being in a position of being oppressed, and you have a voice, or you have privilege, or you have some sort of way of helping them, it's really using your individual power to assist or to talk, or however it is that you can intervene. We've been giving the example of bullying because bullying is so prevalent in school. So if you will see a friend being bullied, it's really speaking up, or even just ensuring that they are okay, so that they know that they are not alone.
I also think there is no neutrality. There is no neutrality in allyship. It's either you are or you're not. Right. And this also comes to the same notion of being an upstander or bystander. There isn't, well, I'm not partaking in it, right? By not doing anything, you are doing something. You're also maintaining the status quo. Right. So when your kids come and tell you such and such person was bullying this person, as parents, we go to, what did you do? We ask that question because I think we have an understanding that kids usually do things in groups, and this is across adults as well. People act differently around groups, right? The more they have an audience, the more they are likely to do it. Whereas if your child were to walk away from that situation, that's one less person watching them. That's one less person potentially amplifying that as being okay, because they walked away. That communicated, I'm not okay with what you're doing.
And I think the example of being not racist and being anti-racist is also another example of how we can be bystanders, because when you are not racist, it's just words. It means there's no need for you to back that up. But if you are anti-racist, anti-racism is defined by the work that you do, by the actions that you do to fight against the different phases of racism that you have been learning about. And the confidant, I like to think of a confidant as exactly that, the person that you can tell your story and feel that you're being heard. And not only are you being heard, but you are believed. And I think it takes a lot of courage to open up and share your pain and share because every time we are sharing our experiences, I can't remember, I think it was Brené Brown who said shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces. So being identified as that person that someone can come to you and share their story. So in you sitting down and listening without judgment and listening to understand and listening to show empathy and not sympathy, you are being that confidant that is needed in allyship. And finally, the scholar, I think of a scholar as exactly that, somebody who researches and learns. And I want to emphasize that it's not about the academics here.
The titles.
It's not about the titles. It's really about just learning from different stories, learning different narratives, and knowing that there's really no one way of experiencing any type of oppression. So you have the knowledge, because for the most part, we can't change systems from being outside them. We have to be within them to be able to change them. So the scholars are the ones that are dedicated in learning, and that looks different from one person to the other. Some are in the community talking to elders, talking to the youth. And I think Aspire Hub is doing a good example of that. These workshops are an answer to a problem that you noticed because you were doing the what a scholar does in the allyship journey. So as you think of the 7 types of different ways of being an ally, I'm curious to know if you see yourselves in those, or what kind of an ally have you been, or what kind of an ally do you aspire to be? And please feel free to use the chat.
I think about the challenger,
right?
A different word, probably saying the same thing as a scholar, is walking into a room and having someone tell you, this is what it normally looks like. And my question is, what is normal? Right? Because normal for me does not necessarily mean normal for the next person, right? And we're talking about our being able-bodied, right? Quote unquote, it's normal because we can all walk in and sit down. What if someone has a wheelchair? Where would they go? Right? When in restaurants, they have like the booster chairs that they give to kids, because it's like we're trying to create that little step for them to get into that. So it's just being able to reflect on that. It's challenging that that's not how it may be working that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's inclusive of everyone in that.
And I like the mentor one as well. I think that that's exactly what Aspire Hub is also doing again. When you have adults and older people in the community, the work that you're doing here is defines mentorship, where you're modeling to the youth that they have a community, they have spaces that they can share their stories. And I think a coach is really self-explanatory. They lead, I think, I see coaching and championship and sponsorship all going under the same umbrella. So I like we said earlier on, not to be caught up in the different words, because when you think about them, they really all intersect. An amplifier could also be a sponsor and champion and all of that. We see your hand, Sister Tope.
Thank you, Sister Shayla. Thank you for validating some of the work that we do. Sometimes you are doing things you don't even know what it is. So it's good when we have professionals kind of help us put the work that we do in perspective. That's really validating. So thank you for that. I wanted to reflect on 2 experiences that I've had. One that I experienced and one that I witnessed. When I first came into the country as an immigrant, I worked for an organization where the leader was not very nice to some of the employees. And in that organization, we happened to have a number of people of color that work there. On several occasions, I was told that I have an accent, and I knew I had an accent. So one day I asked him, do you not have an accent too? I can't even place it. I don't know what this accent is. Is it American? Is it British? Is it Canadian? Anyway, so I had my ups and downs at that first place of employment. But there was another employee who worked there. From time to time, she would come to me and just tell me to not be offended, to be patient, she's been there for a while. She's not even like full-time like the rest of us. She comes in and spends a few hours to do the work that she did. But I really appreciated her looking out for me in that season of my life, because I thought about leaving several times. I thought about, I'm just going to look for another job. I'm just going to quit. But I also knew that I needed the references. I needed to have that Canadian experience for me to be able to pivot. But as tough as it was to work in that place, as toxic as it was, remembering that this person was at work gave me that motivation to keep going to work. There was a time she gave me a scooter for my kids. She gave me a couple of things because she had older kids our kids were older than my kids. She gave us dresses, like, she has daughters and she know I have a daughter. Of course, she didn't know that my daughter was on the tall and big side. So, but that thought, the thoughtfulness of our being an advocate, I think is an advocate I would put, because I'm trying to reflect on this and like, what would I call her in the role that she played in my life, that first year of my life in Canada. First, I'm living in a country that is colder than anywhere I've been to in the world. I'm alone here. My husband was still shuttling. I have 2 little kids, and I have to drive kilometers to this place of work. I have to drop the kids. So I already have struggles in my life. And I get to work. If I'm 1 minute late, I'm in trouble, or if something happens, so, but that succor that I got from this ally, because that's what I call her, she would talk to me about what she's doing with her kids, how, she's enrolling them in these activities. She's encouraging me to put my kids in sport. I'm like, do you know if I can afford it? But she would encourage me. So, it was just good to have that at work. And I think that experience is something that I would call like an advocate, because she was just advocating for me, even though she wasn't advocating like addressing the boss, but she was kind of looking out for me. And I've tried to pay it forward in my own little way too, when I see people that I've worked with or in different places, where I can just give them a little nudge, a little encouragement for them to hang in there and, maybe do it this way. Few people have reached out to me as to microaggressions or discriminations that they faced at work. But that I kept referring back to that experience because it got me grounded and helping them to look for someone that has your interest in, someone that smiled to you, someone that greeted you, someone that said your name correctly. Have coffee with them, take a walk with them. And it has really been helpful in my career in this part of the world. I will look like I've had a lot of great friends that are not even of my color, just because I try to be that for them and they try to be that for me back. And, just a little walk at lunch, a little coffee together, and I can listen to their story. They can listen to my story. In that way, we were able to be allies to one another. I guess that's just one tip I wanted to add as you've asked us to reflect on what this means to us and how we are also doing it to others. The second experience that I observed was when we immigrated again. My kids were they were younger. My daughter there was going to grade 1, and we stayed with a family. I would say that there are a lot of things that we are doing for ourselves now as people of African descent that we are already allies to one another. When I tell my Caucasian friends that my friends come from the other country and they live with me for weeks, it's alien to a lot of my friends. Like, really? Like, people live in your house, like literally for weeks, for months? But that's what we do, right? This family received us for a couple of weeks, and my daughter was going to that same school with their daughter. And at school, their daughter said that my daughter is her sister, or maybe her cousin, or something like that. We're not related by blood, But at school, because she's been in that school, so she started to introduce her to everyone. This is my cousin. This is my cousin. And that experience gave this little kid coming from Nigeria soft landing in that school. Yeah. So that's an encouragement I've given the youth as well. When you see someone, that looks like you, or someone that you just feel a little empathy towards, take a step, do something, So that experience, she still remembers it tomorrow. She talks about this friend teaching her about maple syrup, teaching her about, how to eat, a few things that she didn't know how to eat from back home. So I guess those two lived experiences, one for myself and one that I observed, were the ways that I reflect on being an ally. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm hearing the importance of that connection, right? It's not people necessarily doing a particular response, but feeling connected to somebody when you go through those experiences.
Right. And I was also thinking, if you didn't get that support and found another job, just hypothesize that there is no guarantee that the experience in the next job would have been any different. And sometimes when we have similar experiences in different spaces, we end up thinking we are the problem versus seeing the problem as the problem. So that's the importance of and power of allyship, which takes us to our last video.
Well, you should be. How much candy is there? How much is all that?
Yes, I want to see.
I'm buying it all.
Fine, I want to see.
I'm buying it all. I am going to buy it all. I'm going to give it away to all these people. You should be ashamed of yourself.
I am not ashamed of myself. I'm standing up for this young person.
Yeah, you're really standing up for them, yelling at them.
Oh, and they all around the country, and you should see how they live, right?
Yeah.
So
You're doing fine. Yeah, I'm the ignorant person here. Do whatever you want.
so you called me and
Do whatever you want.
They're doing I have no idea. All of these are 74. All of these 5.
Yeah, right here.
25.
I'm going to come on right now and get your cash.
Oh, right.
Wait right there. Come on, man.
What we missed was
The before.
him coming back to, he bought all the candy. So we see a young man selling his candy. And I think you're very familiar. Sometimes schools have fundraisers. I've had my kids sell stuff. So we see a young man of African descent outside the store selling his candy. And we can see, and I want to emphasize that, of course, we are not painting a picture. We know that not all people of European descent are like that, or not all young Black boys are selling candy or anything like that. But it's a great example of, I think, allyship. As we saw him, he saw a young man being verbally attacked by an older woman, telling them not to sell their candy. And I think you heard some of the comments. He was like, you should see how they live. So there were a lot of things said in that video. And I'm curious to know what showed up for you guys, having talked about different ways of allyship, how to be an ally, or even the 7 types of allyship that we just talked about. What can you put into perspective from that video? I think it was short, but we can take away some stuff. We can put into perspective what we were just learning in theory.
The sponsorship.
Yeah. He was also an advocate, I would say.
Mm-hmm. He also didn't question his experience, just believed in the cause.
He was an amplifier too, I would say. I think I can tick all the boxes for him. And back in the day, I would say he kept his cool. The young man kept his cool. But I think everyone has a right to express themselves the way that's comfortable, as long as you're not hurting anybody. So there's really no single way of responding. But if you noticed, he was really just focused on his business. Mm-hmm. As soon as he was asked, he said his prices, and the ally who showed up bought everything for him. And I think that's just one way, one good example of how we can be allies. And I'm pretty sure he's never met that young man before. So meaning you don't only have to be an ally to people that you know or you have a relationship with. When you just see an injustice to another human being, which is really what Ubuntu is about, being human with each other, knowing that I am another you and you are another me. So when I see you in pain, when I see you in grief, I grieve with you. When I see you in joy, I celebrate with you. And I think that video kind of ties it up for us. And I'm curious, does anybody have any reflections?
He didn't ask for a discount.
He did ask for a discount. Sister Tope, I think you want to say something. I can see you're beaming with a smile.
No, I am just in the room and just enjoying the experience. I have nothing to contribute.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So most of these points have already been discussed. Noreen was holding this book before. I don't know if people can see it. I'm never sure where the camera is, but
Right there.
can you guys see this book?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was introduced to this book in my undergrad many years ago. I'm not going to say how many years because I don't want to I don't want to give away my age here. It really breaks down allyship and being an ally, and it has different activities. And we just took out the 7 steps that are recommended for as tangible ways of being an ally. The first one is understanding oppression. I think that we can't really fight against something without understanding its roots. So when we talk about oppression, we're obviously looking into things like colonization and how it continues to impact certain groups and how it's perpetuated systemically. Some of the examples being the indigenous communities, and we saw the graves and things like that. So when we understand oppression from the roots, we are able to become better allies. And understanding different oppressions, if we go back to the chart that we made reference to the activity that we had, we will see that there's different petals of our identities that intersect. And Kimberly Crenshaw coined that term intersectionality when
1990s, when we finally recognized that the differences in experience for women of color than white women when we're fighting for equal rights. And it is in understanding that those differences have an impact in how individuals engage and show up, right? So our conversation centers around race. It also has a difference, right? When we talk about offering a seat, opening a door, holding a bag for someone, those experiences could actually be received differently because of your skin color as well, right? So it's not just I'm being an ally as an individual, but also all of these factors play a role in how my actions get received. Mm-hmm. And we're also bringing into consciousness that our healing only takes place when we have also started healing. That's the way we can also heal the people around us. And we can know what our limits are. We can know who is in our corner, but we can also become our own liberators. We're not waiting for other people to do that.
And I think what often happens is that we often repeat what we haven't repaired. So the healing of the ruptures that we've had across life is very important, especially as parents, because we often parent from the way we were parented, or we do what we know. So unless we are really making the conscious decision to heal from our different traumas and different experiences, and immigration was another topic that came up at different parts of this conversation. Immigration has its own traumas. So really making the conscious decision to heal so that we don't bleed on our children or on our partners or our friends or even our workmates is important in this allyship journey. And becoming an ally, because I think that we've been talking about how to be. So it's important that we move from talking the talk to really walking the walk, taking the action. And many examples have been given, and we just watched a video that demonstrates how just one way of being an ally. So depending on the different oppressions that your friends could be experiencing. I'm addressing the youth, hoping that we do have youths in this call. And the educating other allies piece, I really like that it's talking about other allies versus educating your oppressors, because I think that and I'm using that word with caution, because I don't think it's helpful when we call each other oppressors and victimizers or victimized. But in the journey of allyship, we acknowledge that, of course, there's oppression, and there are people that are put in those positions that perpetuate the oppression. So when you do have people that are aligned, and I think that's what, again, it speaks to the work that is being done here at Aspire Hub, where like-minded people put their heads together with the goal of empowering our youth and making sure that they have safe spaces. And in those spaces, we educate each other. And that's exactly what we're doing right here. And lastly, maintaining hope. I think that there's not much that can be done when we are hopeless. It's just the hope that keeps us going, even when times are hard, and knowing that no storm really lasts forever. And I think the most one of the points is that when you are an ally, I often see people saying, "Oh, LGBTQ ally, this, and ally." I just want to make a point that you don't have to parade yourself as an ally. Your actions are the ones that define your allyship. Because if I am an oppressed person, I have to be the one that sees you as an ally based on our interactions versus you telling me that you're an ally. Because if your allyship is just based on theory, then we've just learned in this workshop that allyship is about social action. It's really not about you telling people that you're an ally. It's not the title, it's the work that you do. And that concludes it. So in your screens, you have references. I think part of us being allies is giving credit that we learn from others. And these were not just our ideas, as much as we shared our experiences and put our voices and our own taste to the journey of allyship. We also learned from other scholars and people that have written books about allyship. So we have that as our last slide for people that want to continue. One of the different ways was the scholar. Here's a tangible way of continuing the journey. And I think T can share that slide with people again if people need it. But Noreen also has the, what is it called?
QR code.
Yes. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for participating. And I know that participating means different things to different people. Just by being here and digitally connecting with the few people that I hear, Noreen and I are grateful and honored. Are there any last thoughts?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you to you both. You've opened my eyes to seeing what allyship means. In my place of work, we have employee resource groups, and there's lots of people who join employee resource groups as allies. And sometimes I wonder, what they're doing there. Like, are they really allies, or are they just performing, like you said? And now I realize like how much, how helpful just having an ally can be, and how it makes you feel better when you know that there's somebody who is there just to support you, even if they may not be experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing. But they're just there to show you their love and their support, and to just let you know that they're humans just like you, and validate whatever feelings you're feeling at that time and all of that. So this is great. It's also encouraging me to be an ally to others. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We had a thought in the room.
Thank you very much. For allowing me to say a few words. Earlier on, before we came to the issue of allyship, we dealt with the word empathy and sympathy. Under sympathy, like one has lost one job miscarriage of justice within the work environment. Usually, one will be down. The employee concerned will feel bad that he has lost the job. Then the issue of wrong accusation, it could even mean losing of self-esteem, which is very bad. And it can even be a sort of an issue that will weigh down the person. So it's good that such a person needs encouragement, needs to be supported. Otherwise, the person could go haywire, and become something else. But the issue of allyship has dealt with all the topics that we are in for today. Because being allyship, we now we encourage the person. When you are a champion, you advocate, you are an amplifier, you are upstanding and confident. And again, a scholar, as an observer, I've really benefited from this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Noreen and Shayla, for sharing your thoughts. Sometimes we take this knowledge for granted, but it's amazing to see that, we don't forget, and we are able to break down, because sometimes racism seems really so huge. But to have experts and professionals that are able to just break down things for us, that can be very, very useful. Thank you, Aspire, for the great work that you're doing. I like to think that even if it's just one person that showed up, or 100 people, it is still a difference that we're all making. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. On this note, I just wanted to send notes of appreciation to Shayla and Noreen. They are two sisters that I've earned through this experience. We've never met before prior to meeting last month, and it feels like I've known you all my life, So thank you for being in our corner. Thank you for being allies for us. We feel richer, we feel stronger, we feel healthier, just knowing that we can get resources and support from you. So thank you for being with us, for making the time at short notice to pivot and then to show up and do this for us. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much for the amazing work that you are doing in the community. The healing work that you do is going to impact generations and generations to come. So thank you so much. I am on behalf of Aspire Hub and the board and the students that we serve and the parent community, we are really thankful. And I wanted to also encourage our audience today that this is a recording that a lot of people will have access to. And then the conversation has not finished. We still have two more. We have another one in October 14. We are going to be talking about police action in the community. So we hope that people that are here can also continue to join us and support this initiative. It's good that we have people join. Yes, we know it's recorded, but it's also encouraging to see people join. So help us spread the word to the people in your world. Let's ask real life questions so that we can have some good content recorded for people to continue to reference. So we have November as a wrap up, where I think Ms. Shayla might be coming back. I'm not sure yet, but we're going to be talking about actions that work, anti-racism actions that work. We're going to be tying up together with a big, beautiful ribbon and just completing the conversation in November. We have a member of our board. We have some member of the board join earlier. Some of them have to leave. We have another member in the room, Etuk. I don't know, Miss Nta, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
Do you want to say some words on behalf of the board?
Of course.
Hi, Shayla and Noreen. I was just typing my comments in the chat right now. I was saying thank you so much for coming and for teaching us. I learned something new today. When I saw the thing about allyship, I was like, oh, what do you think am I going to learn today? But I think this was really useful, and I'm glad that we're also going to have it on the website for us to refer to. So thank you, ladies. Thank you for your love and thank you for your sacrifice and the time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We love you and we appreciate you. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Remember this, I'm a king, I'm a legend and I'm a champion.